Good morning, just Patrick here again. Just wanted to jump on and talk about diet in the sense of a lifestyle choice as opposed to a diet. So it's interesting because the way that people will label stuff will tend to change the outcome or determine how someone is going to take action in that process. So if we label something as a diet, my experience with people that do such thing is like anything with a program, whatever, there is a start and there's an end date. And the same thing when you label something as a diet, we tend to have a start and end date. Now the other thing is my experience with diets, especially like extreme diets like the Dushan diet, there's one called there's a cabbage diet. There's loads of these different weird diets, but stuff like the Atkins diet, the keto diet. These diets are all great and they will work. There's literally no argument in the fact that stuff like the keto diet and the Atkins diet works, but it starts to create and put a huge amount of strain on the food choices and the things that you can actually choose to eat. And so it becomes not so much of a problem of losing weight, but it's the sustainability. Now, if you can't sustain something for any period of time, the reality of it is that once you stop doing the thing, guess what happens again? And we see this time and time again. And you see it with celebrities all the time when they have to get in shape for movies, and they do one of these crash diets and they'll lose all the weight, and then all of a sudden, when they stop doing the diet, because it has a start and an end date, they pack the weight back on again. Now, what we know is that actually starts to have huge impacts on the way that people's bodies start to actually work. And as a result, can actually start to cause problems with people's organs, with people's weight gain, with people's hormone balances, because it's a little bit like coming on and off of drugs. It's a little bit like coming in and out of stuff like alcohol and caffeine. There's almost always a side effect when you have to give up those things. And it's the same thing when our body is used to getting certain types of calories and certain types of fats and certain types it will start to learn to produce the hormones that actually hold those things. So when you crash and spike and take all the carbohydrates out of your diet, all of a sudden you introduce carbohydrates back into your diet again. All of a sudden your body is going to start to retain things in a completely different way. So here's the easiest thing you can do is I will almost always call it a lifestyle choice as opposed to a diet. So some of the things that I chose to do as like a lifestyle choice, one of the main things that I do as a lifestyle choice is something called intermittent fasting. Now, it's not a diet because there are no restrictions on the foods that you can choose to eat when you're using intermittent fasting as a way of controlling your weight. And basically all intermittent fasting says is that you restrict the number of calories that you're eating in a day down to very minimal amounts on a couple of days a week, and then you eat normally the rest of the week. Or you give yourself an eating window in which to actually eat in. Now, the purpose of this is that what it essentially is supposed to do is force your body to use up all of its glycogen stores, and as a result, you start having to go into your fat stores to create the energy to keep the body working. And the way that this works is it breaks down your fats into something called ketones, so your body can metabolize these and use these as energy to create the respiration process. Now, this is a lifestyle choice. This isn't a diet. I haven't had to change my diet. I can still stay on a vegan diet. You can still stay on a meat diet. You can still eat dairy and wheat, etc. But it's a lifestyle choice. I've chosen to modify my dietary patterns or times that I eat so that it works in a way that actually sustains my body and keeps my organs working in a very sustainable way. Now, there are also some just very other simple things that you can do. Now, to say that you cannot have a food typically makes people really want the thing. Whereas if you use that thing as a reward for hitting your targets, e.g., if you can manage to stay good 5 days out of the week, then okay, you can have a couple of treats at the weekend. And we call it the 80-20 rule. The 80-20, if you can be good 80 to 90% of the time and you can be a little bit bad 20% of the time, your body will still be able to cope and you'll still see long-term sustainable changes. Because if you can eat well for 80% of the time, if you can add greens 80% of the time, if you can drink water with your meals 80% of the time and then drink soda the rest of the time, then as a result, you'll start to see longer changes. Whereas if you drink soda every single day, you don't ever add any greens, you never do anything to, you will never see any changes. But what I would always do, and what I would always label them as, is not diets. Because as soon as you label something as a diet, you're setting it up for a start and end date, and you're setting yourself up for failure in the long term. You may well do very well in the short term, but my experience is it's very rare that anybody can do really well with a diet in the long term. Even stuff like the paleo diet, vegan diets, these can all be really difficult with long-term outcomes. It's great now. Eating a vegan diet is so much easier because there's so many more options. And again, we know that these are lifestyle choices. I have chosen to take meat out. I have chosen to take dairy out. I've chosen to predominantly take wheat out. And the main reason being is that I understand the effects that these have on our body. I've chosen to reduce the sugar in my diet as much as I possibly can, especially refined sugars. So again, I use these as treats. I tend to only use them when I'm having, say for example, staff meetings. We might have a cake on a staff meeting, or occasionally at celebrations or birthdays at parties. Again, we'll have stuff like wheat and cake because obviously we know that there's sugar and flour in those things, and I'm not a gluten intolerant, but I've chosen to take those things out because what we know is those things are reacting in people that have gluten intolerance for a reason. And the main reason obviously being is that our bodies were not designed to eat these things. They're very refined, they're very processed, and as a result, they're always going to have a negative effect. If you want to learn a little bit more about any of these topics, about any of the stuff that I've been talking about, maybe you want to know a little bit more about why people are more reactive to wheat nowadays, maybe you want to learn a little bit more about intermittent fasting, which I've done videos and stuff on in the past, and we've actually got a couple of podcasts where a couple of my interviewers, or interviewees, should I say, have actually done intermittent fasting themselves, and there's a few tips and hints on how you can actually do that and do it in a sustainable way. Guys, until tomorrow, take care, and I'll see you soon.